Good evening, everybody, and welcome to this meeting of Dacorum Borough Council's Development Management Committee. My name is Councillor Garrick Stevens, and I am the chair of the committee. The vice chair is Councillor Fiona Guest, who's sitting in the front desk over here. The other members of the committee in attendance this evening are Councillors Bristow, Patterson, Mitchell, Hobson, Riddick, Walker, Durrant. We have an apology from Councillor Smith-Wright, who is in fact speaking against 5A and 5B and will be leaving the meeting after that. We also have an apology from Councillor Wyatt Lowe. There are a number of council officers in attendance, and the lead officer this evening is Fiona Bogle, who's standing in for Philip Stanley. We've got Robert Freeman speaking for 5A and 5B, Colin Lecarte speaking on 5C, and 5D is Harry Coleman. Jodie Edwards here is our legal advisor, who will be here to keep me on the straight and narrow. And we've got Kaylee Johnson, who is recording the important minutes and the vote as we go. And we also have Councillor Madden, who has arrived just in time. Thank you. As they say, it all helps. We're not expecting a fire drill this evening, but if the alarm sounds, please make your way to the ground floor and assemble outside. If the meeting is extended, there may be a comfort break during this meeting at around 9 p.m. Before we start, please mute or turn off your mobile phones. We've got a few items which are the procedures. The minutes. The first item on the agenda this evening is to approve the minutes of the last meeting of the committee, which is on the 20th of March. The minutes have been circulated. Are these minutes agreed? Thank you. I'll sign it after the meeting. We've done apologies for absence. Declarations of interest. The next item on the agenda is declarations of interests. Please can I remind members to declare any disclosable, pecuniary or other interests at the beginning of the relevant planning application. Any member who declares an interest will be allowed to stay in the meeting but will not have the right to vote. I also want to remind members that only those present during the entire debate for an item are entitled to vote on it. Public participation. I would like to remind members of the public about the rules regarding public participation. We have a number of members of public who have registered to speak, and the list has been circulated. Our normal practice is to bring forward applications where a speaker is present, and that is the case for 5A and 5B. You will be invited to address the meeting when the item you have registered to speak is to be discussed. The normal procedure and rules in respect of times to speak will apply. Time per speaker is 3 minutes. Where more than one person is speaking on a planning application, the shared time is increased from 3 to 5 minutes. And the 5 minutes will be shared equally unless the sharing of time has otherwise been agreed prior to the meeting. And ward councillors are entitled to their own 5 minutes to speak. Speakers in objection to the officer's recommendation are taken first. A timer will be displayed on the screen and times will be strictly enforced. Members of the public will not be entitled to take any active part in the meeting. Microphones and cameras should be turned off at all times. I have the discretion to remove any member of the public from the meeting if they interrupt, try to engage in the discussion, or are abusive. For each application, the officer will present the report to the committee. Then the participants from the public are called to speak. Following this, questions are taken from the committee along with statements and comments for debate. There will be a vote among councillors which will represent the decision of this committee. Now we're turning to 5A. We're changing the procedure a bit this evening.
Can I declare an interest in 5A and 5B as ward councillor? No, I thought I'd just point that out anyway. Thank you.
Right, we have noted, right. slight change in the way we are going to do 5A and 5B. The officer will be presenting both presentations sequentially, and then we'll take each application 5A and then 5B in order. Robert, over to you. Councillor Patterson.
Yes, sorry, as a ward councillor, I'm aware of the site. I haven't discussed it with anybody. I have an open mind.
Thank you. Right, Robert, over to you.
Thank you, Chair. Good evening, everyone. So yes, Councillor Stevens has alluded, I'm going to take the first two items on the agenda, which are items 5A for the construction of 19 homes of land off Tring Road, Wilstone, and 5B for the construction of a substation to serve this development and the 9 units already approved on the site. The recommendation on 5A is that we delegate the application with a view to approval, subject to the heads of terms as set out in section 10.2 of the report and associated planning conditions. The recommendation in item 5B is that we recommend the application for approval. I do need to add a further condition to item 5A to state that notwithstanding the details on the plans hereby approved, the grant of planning permission does not extend to the construction of the substation. That's purely to clarify between the two schemes that are under consideration in this case. And I believe the substation does actually show on some of the plans on item 5A, although it's not for consideration as part of that item. So the application site is located in a designated rural area of the borough on the northern edge of the village of Wilstone. It is accessed by a newly formed T-junction approved under the previous planning permission for the site and for the 9 units on that site that have got planning permission. The slide for you obviously shows the red outline for that wider site. The aerial photo on the right-hand side demonstrates the position as of 2025, early 2025, it's on Google, and shows that you can clearly see the roofs of the, 5 of the dwellings that have been approved, and there are 2 dwellings there already under construction as unit 6 and 7 on that scheme, with further 2 units to the south of that, subject to that original consent. You can also see on that slide the beginnings of foundations for other properties on that development. Taking you through the planning history, I'm sure members are probably aware of this, but the initial application back in 2020 was approved on a planning appeal, and is shown on the left-hand side there. That was for the construction of 28 units on this site, including a mix of affordable housing units, as shown there. The subsequent to that, members also approved in 2022 an application for a variation to that approved plan, albeit that application was subsequently withdrawn, and that's shown on the right-hand side of this slide. So as you can see, I'll move on. We've approved recently the 9 units as shown on the right-hand side of that side on the extract there. The previous planning approval for the site is shown on the left-hand side, and that permission has lapsed now, given the difficulties in implementation of that scheme and at the time the SANG mitigation associated with that site. And as you can see on the right-hand side, the current proposals is a hybrid of those 2 schemes, effectively. The applications before members are given the objections of Tring Rural Parish Council and given the previous background to the site. The key policy test, as is always the case in these items, is whether the council does not have an appropriate supply of housing under the NPPF, and therefore in accordance with paragraph 11 should grant planning permission unless policies to protect areas or particular assets of importance At the point, I'd remind members that the site's not in a greenbelt location and is not in a area covered by the Children's Area of Outstanding Natural Beauty or Children's National Landscape as it is now, would provide a strong reason for refusal of planning permission, or the adverse effects of doing so would significantly and demonstrably outweigh the benefits. And I'd emphasise the significant and demonstrable parts of that policy test. We all know the housing land position on the boroughs has recently been described as dire at around 1.3 years supply, with a chronic undersupply of affordable housing and market housing. So the merits of the scheme before us and where we've got to now. First of all, the scheme will deliver affordable housing. It will deliver affordable housing above the policy requirements in the core strategy, albeit this is a reduction in affordable housing provided from the previous scheme. That reduction has occurred primarily through the loss of first homes, which were proving very difficult to actually market as affordable units, primarily due to the price cap, outer London price cap on those properties. It also comes about because of a change, obviously, in circumstances with the SAN contributions, and it comes at a cost of increased viability and concerns raised during the processing of the application as costs have steadily risen in relation to this site. What was approved as part of the skill scheme was, as I say, 7 units of affordable social rental units, 3 units of shared ownership, and the 4 first homes that I mentioned earlier. As part and parcel of the 9-unit scheme, as shown on the right-hand side there, we also approved 4 affordable housing units as part of that development. And importantly, I think for members to note on that case is that the 2 units, 6 and 7, which are the yellow box at the top there, are effectively much larger affordable housing units than would have previously been delivered on the site. The current proposals before us still deliver 6 affordable rental units and deliver 1 shared ownership unit. This scheme has always been delivered in respect of local housing needs and closely follows the local housing needs identified in the Tring Rural Parish Housing Needs Assessment. And I think that's obviously important as well for members to note in terms of it supplying actual proper housing, affordable housing for local residents. Moving on from that side of things, I appreciate that a number of people have expressed concerns regarding the highways implications of the scheme. The highways implications are effectively, that the scheme continues to be accessed via a T-junction, as was the approved scheme, and as is the constructed scheme on the site at the moment. That T-junction includes appropriate visibility in respect of neighbouring properties and the bridge and the highway, and it also has no objections from the Highway Authority. The proposals include improvements to pedestrian routes and crossings being provided under Section 106 and Section 278 for approvals for those sites. It's worth noting that I put and included this slide for the purposes of demonstrating that since that approval, 9 units have been granted opposite the application site. But in granting those units, obviously the highways implications of the 2 schemes and the cumulative impact on highway safety was considered by the Highway Authority. And again, there are no highways grounds for refusal on that basis. Quickly go through a few of the slides showing the elevations for the proposed dwelling. So these are plots 1 and 2, 3 and to 6, 12 and 13, and elevation 17. I don't intend to say a huge amount about the design of the properties other than it very much conforms with what's already approved on the 9-unit scheme, and is very much in keeping with the character and appearance of that area. One of the main reasons that this application was pulled from the February Planning Committee was in relation to the drainage issues. So I'll briefly touch on those now. Previously, we had anticipated putting it on the agenda with the LLFA removing their objections, and the LLFA came back with actual objections to the proposals. These have subsequently been resolved over the last couple of months. But in brief, what the issues were relating to the data, in rainfall data had been updated, and therefore the implications in terms of needs for surface water drainage would need to be reflected in updated drainage calculations. That's been remodelled. The LLFA are satisfied with the remodelled data. Additional storage has been added below the parking bays. You can see on the left-hand side of that slide. And it has been clarified that the attenuation basin is sufficient to cope with water in the event of a pump being a power failure and the pump not being operational, so pump out from that drainage feature. So those have fundamentally addressed the LLFA concerns, such that the LFA no longer object to the proposals. So in conclusions on the item 5A, the benefits of the scheme include new homes, affordable homes, open space, improvements to pedestrian linkage to the canal and village, supporting for the economic viability of the village, because the people who live there will use the facilities and associated areas to that, and the increasing biodiversity value of the site. But increasing biodiversity value is around 55%. The only harm identified is a slight harm to the character and appearance of the countryside, but that harm to the countryside, as addressed by the previous planning inspector, was given very limited weight and continues to be given limited weight in this instance, all of which leads us to the conclusion that the application should be granted and delegated with a view to approval. Item 5B, so we've got the same application site effectively outlined in blue. You've got the access road serving a substation that has been constructed adjacent to the boundary with number 90, Tring Road. Those are the elevations supplied for the substation. And will briefly take you through the photos. As I say, this is the retention of the substation, which you can just about see on the slide, picture on the left-hand side behind the garage. And again, showing its position in relation to the garage at 90 on the right-hand side. This is a slide taken from the garden at number 90, looking obviously back towards the substation. And as you can see, it appears over the top of the fence to that site. Again, another closer look at that substation and a couple of trees that have been planted in the interim period that we've been considering this case. This is the view on the left-hand side from the side garden to number 90 and from inside 90 Tring Road. And these are the views along the boundary towards the substation and from within the site looking back at the substation from the access route to that site. Officers in this instance are saying that the substation, in view of its elevated position, does result in some modest visual intrusion to the neighbouring property, the adverse impacts of which we consider can be addressed through conditions, and on that basis there should be no grounds for refusal of that case either. Thank you, Chair.
Right, we have a number of speakers on this. Firstly, Ward Councillor Smith-Wright is speaking in objection. You have 5 minutes.
Thank you, Chair.
Point of order, Chair. Are we discussing just A at the moment? Because presumably Councillor Smith-Wright can speak for 10 minutes overall. Is that right?
Councillor Smith-Wright has 5 minutes on 5A and 5 minutes on 5B.
Fine, thanks.
Thank you, Chair. Okay. Thank you for the opportunity to speak this evening. I'm here on behalf of Tring Rural Parish Council and the many residents who have raised concerns about this application for the permanent substation. Let me be clear, we understand that substations are essential infrastructure. This is not about opposing progress, but the way this has been handled. Let me begin with the matter of noise. Whilst substations are typically low noise, this application lacks details, acoustic modelling, which would normally be expected when such infrastructure is sited so close to homes. Residents are understandably concerned about potential low-frequency hums, tonal noise, or transformer-related sounds that may not be picked up in the standard assumptions.
Councillor Smith-Wright, can I just interrupt a second?
Yeah.
I thought we were going to be taking 5A first.
Sorry, I thought I think there's been a...
I was under the impression, because our speaker had to go, we were doing B first.
Oh, correction. Yes, you were right.
Is that right?
Yes, I apologise.
That's okay. Okay. Residents are understandably concerned about potential low-frequency hums, tonal noise. Yes, I've said that. We would welcome confirmation tonight as to whether the acoustic assessment has been undertaken, and if so, whether conditions will be added to control and monitor operational noise levels. The NPPF is clear that developments should provide a high standard of amenity for existing and future users. We also ask for further clarity on environmental safety. We would like reassurance that appropriate containment and safety measures are in place. And then there is the issue of visual impact. The substation, as built, is significantly elevated and dominates certain gardens in a way that is quite out of keeping with the area's character. A sensitive landscaping scheme incorporating mature planting and potentially acoustic fencing would help reduce this impact. A brick enclosure could also be considered to further screen and soften the structure. We also question whether this location, the wettest part of the land, so close to existing homes, was the appropriate site from the outset. Because beyond the technical planning concerns, we must also consider how poorly the situation has been managed in practice. Without notice or explanation, a large industrial generator was installed near a family home far closer than previous equipment on site. It ran non-stop for over 5 weeks, emitting continuous noise and fuel fumes that made daily life extremely difficult for residents. They were not consulted, nor were they informed in advance. The generator operated day and night. Perhaps most worrying of all, some residents were told that the generator would continue to run until planning permission is granted, and if refused, potentially until appeal. This creates a deeply troubling precedent. It is entirely unacceptable for residents to feel as though they are being held hostage by a planning process. Following persistent efforts from the community and the parish council, environmental health has now secured some limited respite, with the generator being switched off from 5 p.m. to 8 a.m. on weekdays. But it continues to operate on Saturdays to service the sales office. To be able to sit in your own garden should not be a luxury, it should be a basic expectation for anyone living in their own home. As members of this committee, I urge you to reflect not only on the technical merits of this application, but on the wider experience of those most affected. Let us ensure that mitigation is not an afterthought, but a clear condition. Let us not allow essential infrastructure to become a source of long-term distress. And let's take forward lessons on how these installations can be better sited, better communicated, more sensitively managed in the future. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Lawless, speaking of objection.
Thank you. I'm reading this on behalf of my parents, whose bungalow borders the rectory development. They have resided at this address for almost 20 years. The consultee comment on the 27th of March on the portal from Environmental and Community Protection has quoted a comment from Rectory Homes, quote, "I am, however, aware that the substation has been constructed without consent, and after speaking to the developers due to the space and flooding considerations, there is no alternative location to be considered," unquote. My parents do not agree with Rectory's response or reasoning. If Rectory are quoting flooding considerations as the primary reason, then why have they cited it in an area where they are inserting a attenuation tank lined with impermeable membrane to prevent groundwater intrusion? This is under parking bays 1 to 6 alongside the service road, which runs parallel to the substation. There is also a very large pool of groundwater to the other side of this service road, which has sat there for months. This membrane is not used on any other areas of the site, so proves this is an area on site of risk. Regarding other possible spaces to site, there's ample room to erect it by the utility pole at the entrance to the site. Their site completed at Wingrave has the substation just inside the entrance, but it is opposite lower cost housing. At Wilstone, it would be opposite a £925,000 property, and we believe this is the real reason for its placement next to my parents' home. There is more than ample space to erect the substation elsewhere on site, as there is open green space to the east of the site, to the land of the field adjoining the development. My parents have looked at the Glanville report on 9 homes already approved, and it shows no groundwater on maps or flood reports on this open space, which is a large area and would have been an ideal site as it's free from groundwater. My parents' fence is 6 foot high and the substation is maybe 3 to 4 foot over the fence from different angles. It is located by their detached garage. That aluminium vents are on full display over their fence. My parents feel they will be within the magnetic field every time they enter their garage, which is daily as they store their logs and chest freezer. The substation is very intrusive as they can see it from every angle from the side of their bungalow. It can clearly be seen sitting at their dining room table. The side of the bungalow facing the substation is their kitchen, living and dining areas. In short, we believe Rectory have built this substation in this particular plot, claiming it is the only viable position for it to be on site, which is completely untrue. There are lots of other options. The truth is they don't want to build it near their high-value homes, as nobody would choose to live so close to one, and they've sited it directly next to my parents' home without any care or consideration to them. It is also planned beside the substation to have a communal bin area and bike store directly by their side kitchen door, if planning is approved for the additional 19 homes, which again is showing a complete lack of care and consideration for them being the long-standing existing residents. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for keeping to time. Now we have Laura Bushby speaking in support.
Thank you. I'm Laura and I'm the planning manager at Rectory Homes. Firstly, I think it's just quite important that we clarify that I know there's been some concerns about the noise on site and the odour. That has been, as kind of explained, due to the temporary generator and not linked to the substation itself, which isn't currently energised or in use. Now, it was never our intention to rely on a generator to complete works on the site. However, due to delays in energising the substation, it has been necessary to do that, to continue works, to be able to deliver the housing on the 9 units that has been approved. The substation itself, as the case officer stated, is a piece of key infrastructure. It can be found in residential settings all over the country. And by the nature of the infrastructure, it is necessary for it to be located in close proximity to residential dwellings to serve those dwellings. I note that the concerns are around the EMFs, the electrical magnetic fields and magnetic fields, the potential noise and the visual intrusion. In relation to electrical magnetic fields, this was covered in the report, but just to clarify, the National Grid website is very clear that substations don't emit electrical magnetic fields. There is a low level of magnetic fields emitted, but once you move maybe a metre from the substation, that level is actually much lower than you would find in a normal residential house in your own home. And that's come straight from the National Grid's website. We've kind of got that information. The noise is a different one. It's difficult for us. Obviously, the substation hasn't been energised as yet. However, we have now got the information that was shared in the addendum yesterday with the statement from Hepworth Acoustics, who are looking at the information as to the noise. And they've also considered the proposed conditions from environmental health. Actually, the conditions proposed by environmental health will really safeguard residents, existing residents and future residents, because actually they're a little bit more robust than is normally seen in this instance, potentially because of the sensitivity. And actually it's requiring the substation to make less noise than the existing background noise of the village and of that location. So actually it's very difficult to come to a conclusion that the substation will cause a noise because the condition is requiring it to be less noisy than is currently there. Obviously, we know there's the A41 and various other things that kind of lead that background noise. The other thing is on visual intrusion, and again, the condition that's proposed to be applied does require us to have a scheme to kind of deal with that visual intrusion. And again, we do feel that in kind of according with that condition, we will overcome any kind of visual intrusion. And I know we're very keen to work with the residents to find a suitable solution. I know we've talked about what that looks like and how we can make that work best for yourselves. So.
Thank you. Right. Members, over to you. Comments? Questions?
Thank you, Chairman. It's been highlighted in the presentation. The council has nowhere near a 5-year housing land supply. So how much weight should we give that in our determination of this application?
Sorry, are we discussing item 5A or 5B? We were going to discuss 5B.
5B, but that is part and parcel of it.
The application for the substation must be dealt with on the basis of it providing essential infrastructure to support those houses. I wouldn't necessarily put huge weight for the substation application on a lack of housing supply because it's a separate planning consideration. It's not delivering homes per se. So that's probably where we sit in relation to this scheme. Obviously, in terms of the housing scheme that's before members at item 5A, it is very significant weight that needs to be applied to that.
Thank you. So it's not really a factor with this one because it just wants to support the housing development rather than actually delivering homes. But it's a very great weight for the 5A, which we'll be determining next.
Yeah, and indeed the substation is required to support the existing 9 units that are being constructed on site as well.
Thank you.
Councillor Hobson.
Thank you. So in terms of visual intrusion, the condition is just talking about trees and screening, but I think a resident, I think it might have been your parents, who wrote emails, I guess, to all of us, had talked about brick structure, which for me would fit much better with the environment. There are lots of little substations in Hemel Hempstead where I often go around walking my dog. I don't particularly find them very noisy. They're probably much older technology, and one would imagine that newer technology is quieter, but they are all brick built. And they even have little bits of gardens, and the neighbours look after the gardens of it. So there is almost, pride would probably be a stronger word, but there has been some thought. It's not just a metal box in the middle of a row of houses. So it'd be interesting if the officer could just advise us on what levers, if any, we have to actually specify the look of the building, and also if we could have it clarified why this couldn't have been built on the east side of the plot, where there seems to be a lot more space, which would also still be near the dwellings. Thank you. So it's 2 questions. Thanks.
Yes, so if we can deal with the siting of the proposed substation first of all, obviously, can I share over the top? Yeah, so if I just share the layout over the top of that proposal, I think it's important to note in terms of the siting of the substation, it is important to avoid areas that are potentially most at risk of flooding, which obviously extends to the attenuation basin, which is there for that specific purpose, and an open space associated around that. The risk of flooding across the site itself is no greater risk in the location adjacent to the boundary. All of the properties on this site have been elevated above ground level, as is the proposed substation. There may also be technical reasons to site it along that boundary, specifically in relation to connections to existing networks and the cost of infrastructure associated with that. I think it's fair to say that Rectory Homes probably undertook quite a detailed feasibility study with power providers as to which locations were the most appropriate, and has to a certain extent been led by the utility providers in choosing the location they have. It is equidistant from their properties and neighbouring properties. It is obviously well away from the canal side and any perceived risks that are appropriate there. Other open space areas within the actual development sites are actually fairly limited to residential gardens. So I think that covers all I really need to say about the siting of the substation. The other question was about appearance and the conditions that were attached to the planning permission. There is no objection in principle from our side to seeking a brick enclosure for that substation if members feel that that is the only solution in this instance, and I would emphasise only solution. My view is that it could equally be treated with a brick wall, could be treated with an acoustic fence, it could be treated with landscaping. It really is a case for members to determine which of those might be an acceptable solution, or otherwise we can adjust conditions to suit that. The only thing I would say about the complete enclosure of the substation is whether there are any technical reasons why that cannot be achieved, which is why I hesitate to push it that far. And I don't know whether there are technical reasons why it can't be completely enclosed. Obviously, it's got vents on the side of it at the moment, which need to operate. So there may be restrictions on complete enclosure, but we can certainly work with the developers to produce an acceptable outcome, I feel.
Thank you. Can I come back, Chair? Thank you. So I think, I mean, I'm not in a position, I don't have the expertise, and I certainly wouldn't understand the detailed flooding requirements. If the outline of the plot is the red line, then to me, at least from what I'm looking at, beyond the gardens of the people in the northeast, there's plenty of space there, but I will, I mean, it is what it is. I don't think perhaps we have the levers to force it to be moved for all of the technical detailed reasons that you mentioned. I'm an electrical engineer by degree, and I have no concerns about the EMF levels. I do understand that the mental stress and worry about it is real, but the actual physics, I would agree with the planner on that, so I don't have any health concerns. But I do, in terms of, I think if it can be screened by brick or something that looks nicer and not just trees. I mean, again, I'm hesitant to prescribe what the screening necessarily should be. I was just taken by the suggestion and the brick ones that were built in the 50s and 60s in and around Hemel that I'm familiar with, that brick would be pleasant. But I mean, in terms of the condition, I think that the screening and just thinking about the stress of the neighbours, and indeed the potential background stress of the new dwellers, the new people living in the houses, if they've got that at the bottom of their garden, given that this is in the green belt and in a village, I think that there is a special case, and it's not in the middle of an inner city, to consider how better we can screen it that is appropriate and sympathetic to the surrounding buildings. And I do think, given that the developer has decided to put it right up against an existing neighbour's fence when they probably could have made their life a lot easier if they'd moved it somewhere else on the site, I think it is appropriate for us to push them on having some kind of visual screening to make it unseen from both the new neighbours and the existing neighbours. Thank you.
We have Councillor Patterson and then Councillor Bristow.
I'm pretty concerned about this, I must say. First of all, can I ask a question? When did the substation first appear in the planning papers? Was it in the same site initially, going back several years? Was it approved in that? In other words, was it approved in that location by the planning inspector?
No. Substation applications are very unusual to come across in planning terms, primarily because UK power networks and associated infrastructures can erect them without requiring planning permission. In this instance, because it was undertaken by the developer and is in the elevated position, it requires planning permission, but otherwise it wouldn't even see the light of our desks, so to speak. Sorry, I've lost the train of, what's the part of the question you were interested in? Yeah, remind me.
Well, whether well, you've told me the answer now, that it wasn't.
Yeah, so it wasn't considered in part of the application, no. It appeared on site in December time, I believe.
Without planning?
No, December time without planning permission. Yeah. It was subject to an enforcement investigation. We obviously determined that it did require consent because of its height and the way it was installed. And obviously we invited an application for that, which is the one before you tonight.
Yeah. Well, I'm also concerned on what I heard earlier about the developers telling the local residents that they would keep it switched on when they don't need to have it switched on. And even if you enforced it or we refused it tonight, they would still keep it switched on until the final appeal.
I think you're confusing the generator that's been currently used on the site with the substation. The generator is only required whilst the substation does not effectively serviced and put into use, and at which point there will be no need for the generator to be on site.
Is the generator close by the substation?
So the generator is approximately halfway across where that access road comes towards that parking courtyard. It does generate a lot of noise. It has generated some concerns over fuel and pollution issues.
So the implication is the same. If people object and
well, we would have to consider whether it was necessary to take enforcement action against the generator, which is obviously open to us. And as Environmental Health have already indicated, the generator in its current condition is not acceptable because of its noise. They have accepted that it can be there on a temporary basis and have worked to restrict the hours of that use of that generator to make that more palatable for residents. But ultimately, the power would lie with us to enforce against that and seek to have it removed, irrespective of whether the application is granted or not.
The other thing is the location, which Councillor Hobson mentioned. And she was concerned about whether or not we could insist that it's moved. Of course, we insist that it's moved if we think it's in the inappropriate location. right next to the residents of 90 Grange Road. Doesn't have to be there. It's ridiculous to claim that's the only location, the whole of the grounds that can have a substation. And I think it should be moved much further away from local residents. And I would certainly propose refusing the substation on that ground. It's in an unsuitable location. It's oppressively designed because it would be an abnormality, really, if it was looked at from the point of view of the incoming residents, never mind the residents who are already there. So that's what I would propose, that we refuse the substation. It would be acceptable to me if it was much further away, resident property, and it, yes, that's the main thing. I think it also as council officer. Thank you.
Just to be clear on it, you will need to consider the application on its merits in terms of the location of the exit site as it is. And to progress an argument that it should be in another location, you would need to demonstrate that it was unacceptable in terms of visual intrusion, noise, and the like in the current position, and that couldn't be addressed by conditions, which I think is a very high barrier and one which I personally believe you could not object on.
Thank you, Councillor Patterson. We'll park your objection for the moment. Councillor Bristow.
Thank you, Garrick. I'm concerned about the noise, actually, because substations do emit a sort of constant low-level hum. I note that no noise impact assessment has been undertaken, which is potentially fair enough because the substation isn't actually on at the moment. What would typically the sort of level of decibels, the level of disturbance look like from something like this being run in the normal fashion?
While Robert's looking for that, there's some numbers in the addendum on the noise levels in decibels.
Yeah, so I'm just going to highlight what the addendum has said on terms of the manufacturer's data provided. States that the sound level of this item would be 56 decibels and equates to a reference sound pressure of 1 metre away from it at 48 decibels. Based on the reference to sound pressure levels for the unit, without housing or mitigation, the noise levels at the nearest residential property are anticipated to be 30 decibels and 24 decibels, respectively. That is significantly lower than background noise and is a perfectly reasonable level of noise to be associated with a development.
Thank you for letting me know the numbers, Robert. I'm just trying to, I can't really conceptualize 30 decibels, so I'm just sort of trying to get an idea of what that might sound like. This thing I've just Googled, it's about a whisper. So there would be a level of noise as the residents use their garden in that case. Do you think that the current stipulation of either fencing or mature planting is an acceptable mitigation to the noise and loss of visual immunity? Or would you view a brick structure being sort of inserted as a condition as a fair and defensible position for us to take?
Yeah, I think obviously from the report I've indicated that a mature hedgerow or fence maintained at a height of 2.5 metres to 2.6 metres would be effective mitigation in that instance. I appreciate others might have a different view in terms of visual impact of that kind of enclosure and might prefer a brick solution. but that is, in my opinion, a satisfactory treatment.
Thank you, Robert. I think that's gone quite some way to alleviating my concerns about both the noise and the loss of visual amenity. I think a hedgerow would be quite appropriate in that position. As such, I'd be happy to move that we approve the application.
Thank you, Councillor Bristow. We'll park that for the moment. Any further comments? I used to know what 30 decibels referred to, but I can tell you it's a very, very low noise levels. I had to research this more recently when I installed my heat pump, and 35 decibels you can't even know at 1 meter. Right. But can I also say that I live next door to a electricity substation. I've been there 40 years. It's got a brick wall around it with wooden gates for the guys to come in and do periodic attention to it. And you wouldn't even know it's there.
Thank you for your intervention.
Right. So, are there any further comments?
So just very, very quickly, apologies, because this is possibly something I should know, I haven't been on this committee for a long time, but obviously this is being delegated and or approved. Is there any comeback that the committee can have on that visual and on the solution, having heard, because the planners here, having heard the concerns and comments here, I guess it can't come back for us to have a look at it or take a view on it. I'm just thinking, because I'm just finding it difficult yeah. Anyway, it would just be interesting to know to have more time. I don't think we will, but to have more time and discussions about what the options are. But I think the answer is no. Thank you.
Councillor Guest.
Thank you, Chairman. We have a proposal in Councillor Bristow. You might want to park this, but I'd second it.
Thank you. Before we leave it, a comment that Robert made earlier about conditions to be able to alleviate the noise and the visual intrusion. Would you like to propose that we have a specific recommendation for mitigation for noise and improve the visual amenity?
The only other thing I could say on that, I guess, is that if members were minded to amend the condition, rather than say the scheme shall comprise either mature planting or fencing to a minimum height of 2.5 metres, which shall thereafter be completed in accordance with the details and retained, you could simply add or other enclosure to a minimum height to that condition. So that would leave you open for other potential solutions to be looked at. If members are satisfied for that change to be made.
Councillor Mitchell wants to say something, Councillor Hobson wants to say something, Councillor Bristow wants to say.
Yeah, just regarding the condition, could we not use language like it's fully screened, so that whatever eventually ends up screening it, it is fully screened from whichever residence?
Councillor Bristow, Councillor Hobson, and then Councillor Madden.
Thank you, Chair. This is very unorthodox, but I know that the residents of number 90 are here today. And if we were to insert a condition, would it be, acceptable to ask them if they would rather have a fence or something vegetated? Because they're going to have to look at it every day at the end of the day. I appreciate that that's highly unorthodox.
Thank you. I don't think we could put this in a condition, but just because I have the opportunity while the planner is here and the neighbours, I would strongly urge that the planners do talk to the neighbours and do find the best solution. I'm hesitant to dictate that it should be brick for the reasons that the officer has said. And I think keeping things open in writing makes more sense because it gives the flexibility for the best solution. But I think that the best solution here should be something that's sympathetic with the surrounding buildings of a very nice development in a very nice part of this village with very nice surrounding houses. I think just a green box actually lets everybody down. And so I think given that the developer has chosen to site it there and not elsewhere on the site, where if it was further away from houses, they could probably get away with a cheap green box. I really would urge that they do actually talk to the residents, the neighbours, and clearly, I think for some of the people on this committee, the preference is going to something that looks more brick-like. And I just hope that they've heard that and they do speak to the neighbours about it. And I hope that this condition is sufficient to do that. Thank you.
Thank you. Just a couple of things, really. I'm not an expert on electricity either, but and I'd be able to boast much higher knowledge on it than me. But my logic would say that the reason that they decided that was the best point is because it's the nearest point to the rest of the village where the electricity is coming in from. So to me, that would be logical to have it where it is. With regard to the look of it and the screening of it, I would have concerns about a brick screening around it simply because I think it would look quite austere if you've got this green box, but then you've got a wider brick wall all the way around it. It's got to have access. You've got to have a gate on it. Someone's got to be able to get into it to maintain it. I think that what Angela said was very sensible to say screened, maybe even going further to say sympathetically screened or something like that, because for me, even if they put some kind of fencing and grew, foliage over it, it would screen it beautifully, and it would help with the ecology, and it would just make a sensible solution as far as I can see. And you could do that on, both sides, facing both the old properties and the new properties, but still needing access into the thing. That's just my observations.
Councillor Guest.
Thank you, Chairman. On page 60 of the reports pack, condition 2 refers to within 3 months of the approval of this application, a noise impact assessment shall be submitted to the local planning authority. And it goes on to say that within a month of the approval of the noise impact assessment and associated mitigation measures, that states that if the noise impact assessment identifies an unacceptable level of noise, then the noise impact assessment shall incorporate mitigation measures to reduce the noise to an acceptable level. So with that condition, is it necessary to specify any more about the screening, because it appears that mitigation is covered by that condition?
Yeah, indeed. And typically noise mitigation would imply an acoustic fence, which is another reason perhaps not to be overly specific in terms of the means of mitigation in condition 1 there. So it does, I think, between the two conditions, leave us good scope to provide an acceptable solution on this site to address the visual impact.
Well, I don't want to go back over the old ground, but I think screening is screening. The question is how effective it's going to be, and I think the general thrust of the discussion has been that we want something fairly solid around that screen, and whatever is solid there, to have something to improve the visual amenity of the area. Not just a brick wall, but maybe foliage, etc., around it as well. So, to what extent can we put a condition which takes us to that point, as opposed to leaving it as open as you've got in to A, B, and C here?
Well, I would agree to leaving it open. As I said, I don't think we should be prescribing the nature of it, but I think the essence of it, and indeed the condition as written may have captured this, the essence is to reduce, i.e. not be able to see it from the neighbour's house. So that for me is the important thing, to have screened it to the extent that after a while, the neighbours do actually forget that it's there, to quote your good self. And just while I've got the floor very briefly, one, it doesn't actually look that pretty, but it's on Northridge Way in Hemel Hempstead, and it's adjacent to 236. So not for tonight, but if people wanted to go and have a look at a typical substation in Hemel Hempstead, and there's actually, on the Google Street View, there's actually the chap that lives next door that keeps the FUL Garden on the front of it, really lovely, which I'm not suggesting that, but I just, because that's a brick, it's brick, and it is hidden, and you forget that it's there, but it's not particularly pretty because it's very square. So I just think that's just, but yeah, I think the main point is to reduce the visual amenity, the visual impact, so that the neighbours can ultimately forget that it's there. We can't put that in writing to test it, but that's the essence, I would say, the spirit of what we're trying to do there. Thank you.
Okay, in which case, let's go back to the proposition. The recommendation is that planning permission is granted. The proposal was Councillor Bristow, seconded by Councillor Guest. Sorry, before we move to that, Councillor Patterson, you've got your light on.
I can see I'm in a minority here, but I still feel the best solution would be to move it. I don't know how much it would cost to do that, and to have it a more suitable location. And then it can be either brick surround or any other surround which will fit in with its surroundings. Thank you.
Well, thank you for your comment, but I think we are making a judgment on the application as it stands in front of us. The first point is to have a vote on the proposition that planning permission be granted. We've had it proposed, we've had it seconded. Let's have a show of hands, and then we can see where we go from there. Show of hands, those in favour that planning permission be granted. 2, 4, 5, 6, 7. That's a little. 8. 8 in favour. Against? Councillor Patterson, right. 1 abstention. So, officer's recommendation that permission is granted is carried. Right, that's 5B. Mr. Lawless, if you've got a dash off for your carer responsibility, feel free. Right. Let's turn to 5A then. Councillor Smith-Wright, you're speaking in objection. You have 5 minutes.
Sorry.
Well,
Sorry, Councillor Stevens. Just to clarify, so that's with the condition unamended, just as it appears in the report?
I think the condition was unamended, yes.
Yeah, okay, thank you.
Thank you, Chair. This development puts undue strain on our existing infrastructure. impacting roads, schools, health services and sewage systems. The negative effects are far-reaching and considerably outweigh any perceived benefits. Since the last application, another 9 homes have been approved directly across from the Rectory Homes development. This has created a dangerous access point for both sites and will severely strain our single-track canal bridge, already under considerable pressure. These roads are ill-equipped for the increased traffic of 50 plus more cars, delivery, service vehicles and heavy construction vehicles, presenting significant safety risks and logistical challenges. Furthermore, the development's lack of sustainability is profoundly concerning. The measures in place fail to prevent the inevitable increase in traffic to Ashridge. Natural England has raised significant concerns regarding the proximity to this conservation area. The proposition of a SANG, which is yet to exist or have planning permission, will be in Aylesbury, in Buckinghamshire, a different county, located far from this community. Surely this cannot be considered a viable solution to the impacts of local development. Mitigation needs to be local, specific, and not impacting the area to be truly effective and advantageous to local residents. The local plan seeks to reduce reliance on cars, a goal contrary to this proposal, given the significant distance from major transport links. The NPPF's approach to economic stability is through the lens of sustainable, affordable development. I feel this proposal fails to deliver. It is fair to assume that people buying the so-called affordable homes can afford to run a car. Let's hope so. For example, one-bedroom homes were built close to Dixon's Wharf in Wilstone, which is remote and lacks links. Many residents, those using those affordable housing, struggle with no reliable buses or cars. It is proven that this area is not environmentally sustainable to live in with such little amenities. Finally, I must address the issue of flooding. This site is positioned dangerously close to a canal that frequently overflows, discharging water into the local vicinity. It is unfathomable to overlook the likelihood of flooding impact. And that, I'm amazed, well, I know that it's normal now, practice to build houses up, but what happens to neighbours when flooding happens? Initially, the Flooding Authority raised valid objections which were inexplicably withdrawn. In conclusion, paragraph 78 of the NPPF stresses the importance of housing development in rural areas to reflect the needs of the local community, avoid isolated homes in the countryside unless there are special circumstances, and support rural services. I stand with my community and our rural villages that must be preserved for generations to come. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, we have Mary Davis and Linda Williams also speaking in objection. You have 5 minutes.
My name is Linda Williams and I live in Wilstone. In granting the original application, the Secretary of State gave great weight to a lack of housing supply. Since that time, there has been a surge of housing development with at least 38 new houses being built in Wilstone. There is no longer a demand for houses in the village. Moreover, the 6 brilliant houses that were built here by Decorum provided homes for the families in Wilstone that needed them. Wilstone is protected by existing Decorum local planning policies. It's in the area subject to recent regulations brought in to protect the Chiltern beachwoods as well. And in fact, Natural England has registered an active objection. Despite granting the appeal, in the report, the Secretary of State did conclude that the development would feature dwellings which conflict with the character and appearance of the surrounding areas, and that this would amount to harm. It does. If the development goes ahead, traffic is obviously going to increase. There's huge emphasis on sustainable transport, as you've already heard. And so there should be, but people still will travel in their car. There's a limited bus service and the roads are already far too dangerous to cycle, except as large recreational groups. And nobody in this village is going to send their child to school on their bike. There will be substantially more wear and tear on the bridge and an increased likelihood of accidents on the blind bend entering the main village, precisely where children cross the road to enter the village recreation ground. Flooding, again, this has been mentioned, it will increase. The land drops away from Tring towards Aylesbury, and it's lowest at the north and east sides of Wilstone. We have a very high water table. Walking across the fields in winter is like walking through a swamp. Certain areas of the village have always been vulnerable to the effects of heavy rainfall, particularly the row of cottages in the conservation area on Tring Road. They even have to use sandbags in front of their front doors to stop water ingress. If permission were granted, it would only open the floodgates to further developments by Rectory Homes, who've already submitted another planning application for an additional 28 houses in the agricultural field behind the current site. We do believe that the approval of this development will result in significant harm to Wilstone, and we would ask the Development Management Committee to refuse the application. Thank you.
Hello, I'm Mary Davis and I also live in Wilstone. I've actually just got two very short points to make, which pretty much reiterate what my friends have said. Firstly, and I'm speaking against the application. Firstly, I'd just like to point out that there's nothing about this application, which is for a large development in the rural area, that makes it any more compliant with decorum planning policies than previous applications on this site that have been consistently refused by the Development Management Committee. And I see no reason why it shouldn't be refused again. Secondly, the proposed SANG mitigation to protect the Chiltern beachwoods doesn't even have planning permission, and if granted, it would be 4 miles away from the village. Although this may provide a solution on paper, in practice, no one is going to travel 4 miles from Wilstone to Aylesbury, of all places. They would nip up the hill to Tringwoods and Ashridge, which are closer, prettier, and in winter, significantly drier. In practice, it would provide no protective effect for the Chiltern beachwoods whatsoever, and surely that's the whole point of the legislation. So that's all I had to say, and I just would request that you refuse this application. Thank you.
Thank you. Laura Bushby speaking in support.
Thank you. I was going to do a bit of a site history recap, but I think the case officer's really kind of done that for me in his presentation. But I think the key thing to note in the 2021 application that was allowed at appeal, it is what the inspector stated, and I know that the member of the public did state a few elements, but they really kind of drew on the fact that the benefits would outweigh the kind of modest harm that they identified. They obviously highlighted the poor housing supply and decorum, but also stated that 28 units on this site would not be disproportionate to Wilstone, and that was their view. They found that Wilstone could accommodate those new homes and that the development would not have a significant impact on the character of the village. They did see that there would be a modest harm, but that would be a modest harm and that would be outweighed by the benefits. Also highlighted, I know that it's limited, but there is the bus service in the village as well. As you know, the scheme before us that we're looking at this evening is not materially different to that was previously approved. And as such, as a committee, you do have to consider what has changed in the intervening years for it to no longer be acceptable. From our perspective, I think the main change is really the housing target and the housing numbers that Decorum are facing. With the recent NPPF changes, this has increased to 1,355 new homes a year that Decorum need to be delivering. Looking at your recent delivery of new housing over the last 3 years, that's at 630 homes a year. That means Decorum at the moment is massively failing in its requirement to deliver new homes for existing and future residents. And if that housing delivery continues at that rate, in 5 years, you'll have a deficit of over 4,000 new homes. And I think that's a really important point to make. We're keen, we've got a site here that is suitable. The village of Wilstone is suitable. It's not constrained by being in the green belt or the Chiltern National Landscape. A planning inspector has previously found this acceptable. We've overcome all technical issues. I know we have concerns about the flooding, but the LLFA have found that what we're looking to do to overcome those concerns are acceptable. There have been no objection from highways in relation to the safety of the site. We're ready to build this site and have a very immediate impact on the housing needs in the area, both for market and affordable housing. I know people are concerned that it's people coming from outside of the area, but the people that are visiting the site now, the phase 1, they are local people. We've got the evidence to show it. They're people from surrounding towns and villages that want those family homes that can't afford them in the conservation areas, in other areas. So, and then the final thing with 12 seconds to go is on the mitigation for the SANG. I know that it's in Aylesbury, but it is actually 4 miles away. The decorum-based SANGs are 20 miles away. So unfortunately, that is the only option, but it is far closer.
You were about to be cut off. You saw. Right. Over to you, members. Questions, comments?
Oh, thank you. Question for Robert first. I've just been frantically going through looking at the approved planning for the 9 dwellings, and I see that ended up with 4 of the dwellings being classed as affordable, which was 44%. And the current planning application that we're discussing tonight, it says is it 37%? Yeah, it includes 7 affordable homes at 37%. Now, I was thinking originally we're going to have a really hard time refusing this tonight because it actually had already been approved for 28 dwellings, and these 19 added on to the other 9 would become 28 dwellings. But on the basis that the PINS officer had actually commented on a part of the reason for overruling our refusal before was because 50% of the properties were going to be affordable, unless I'm mistaken. That if that gave great weight to the reason it was approved, and then the first phase that did get approved was for 44%, and this is only 37%. Actually, this isn't meeting one of the main reasons that the HM inspector gave for approving it. Did I explain that well? Yeah, good. It's just the calculation of the affordable, and if this had come in as higher than 50%, so that the overall equated out to 50%, I think we would have had a much harder job to refuse this today. But I'm really disappointed to see that they've dropped that down, especially when they really struggled to get the application built in the first place.
Yeah, if I could just come back on that. I do understand purely in numbers terms, obviously that doesn't look too good in terms of delivery of affordable housing. What I would say is out of those original 50%, there were 4 first homes being proposed on that scheme. And as members will be aware, first homes are available with an 80% of market rate, and they are capped in terms of their housing price as well, for outer London to £250,000. Now that price bracket and that restrictions on sale doesn't make it an affordable unit. on the ground. We've removed those units from this scheme, and as a consequence of that, and as the previous application, we've increased the size and the tenure of the units that are affordable. So it's delivering not just one bed, not just 2-bed homes, but 3-bed plus homes for affordable purposes. So members must balance, obviously, the improvement in the tenure mix against any loss in pure numbers terms and affordability terms. Policy-wise, in terms of affordable housing, 37% is still significantly above policy requirements in CS19 of the core strategy, and is, for those reasons, acceptable in this instance.
Can I just respond to that? Thank you. Thanks, Rob. You explained that really well, as always. And that does kind of answer the question for me. And in that case, I do think we would really struggle to get it refused. What I mean is, if we refuse it, I think we'd really struggle for it to not come back on appeal.
Councillor Patterson. And then Councillor Hobson.
Yes, I accept the numbers on housing, I think. What I'm concerned about is we're now considering it because there's supposed to be a SANG available. As we know, SANG is in another county, so this committee hasn't had a chance to look at it. We don't know what kind of SANG it is, anything around it. We haven't seen any plans as far as I'm aware. And it's very difficult for us to see whether it's acceptable or not. I mean, the locals will have quite a long way to go and have much more attractive options like Ashridge, much closer in terms of driving and everything. So I don't think there's much incentive for people to go to a SANG in Aylesbury. I'd be very surprised if it was intended anyway for anybody other than new developments in Aylesbury. It's not meant for people in Hertfordshire. The fact that the rules have this 20-mile in relation to very urban areas where you've got to drive a long way to find any suitable green space at all. This green space, every field, every corner, every wood, very close to you. And the other thing is, I think that Natural England haven't waived their objections yet, and you're making an assumption that they will.
So, in respect of the SANG, the SANG being delivered in Buckinghamshire does effectively have more than adequate capacity for Bucks County. It is a very large SANG, which meets Natural England's criteria for SANG sites. On that basis, obviously, it is an acceptable and recognised solution to issues in relation to protected landscapes. It is within catchment of the application site, so I see little reason why Natural England would maintain their objection over the long term once that is secured by a legal agreement. That's not uncommon for items on this committee. We frequently attend this committee with objections from Natural England, and Natural England will not remove their objections until you've signed, sealed and delivered the SANG. Obviously, we're not at that position and we're asking to delegate with a view to approval to get to that position.
Thank you. I just wanted to recognise the concerns of the residents, and that I do sympathise, and I do understand you live there, and you understand how this is going to work in practice. But unfortunately, highways have no issues. So even if you know that it's going to cause problems for roads and you're worried about the bridge, highways, who are ostensibly the experts in this, that are very difficult for us to to raise questions unless we're equally expert is an issue. We've talked about the sang, and I think I would follow on from what Councillor Madden has said. I think on the face of it, we would really struggle to find material planning reasons for turning this down that would not then be overturned on appeal, given the history of this site. And just one comment on changing the nature of a village. This council, I didn't vote for it, but this council did vote for a new local plan that is going to radically change how Tring is going to be 50% bigger. So I think, given the pressure of housing and given the wider political background, this is entirely consistent with the direction of travel, I'm afraid, in terms of the houses that are needed, and changing a character of a village is up for grabs now, I'm afraid. So I'm really sorry, but I can't find any reasons to turn it down that wouldn't then be overturned on appeal. But I do appreciate you coming and expressing your concerns, and I do actually believe you. But that's the situation that we're in. Thank you.
Councillor Madden, did you want to come back?
Yeah, just really to maybe almost as much for the people in the public gallery as anyone else, about the sang thing, because we tend to think of this is the development that we're looking at, and that's their sang, and that's where they booked to go. And it's not really that at all, is it? So what it is, so the people who maybe we're trying to protect Ashridge and the Chiltern Beechwood, so maybe the people at the moment that come from the other side to use that recreation ground would start to use the new one, and then the people that are in this development might then use Ashridge. It's kind of a shifting thing. I just sometimes think that we're so specific, and I'm not insulting anyone's intelligence. As I say, I think it's as much for people that are trying to get their heads around sang as well. I just thought I would mention that, because it's not sort of locking people into where they've got to go. And so the distance of it is not necessarily, as long as it's within the boundary that it's got to be, it's not necessarily part of the discussion for tonight, I think, is what I'm probably trying to say.
Thank you for that. Councillor Mitchell.
Did I hear correctly that one of the objectors mentioned something about an application behind the site, or potential for an application behind the site? Is there an application?
Yes, so a lot of the applications in relation to this site have been withdrawn. I note that there's still on my caseload an application effectively for 28 units behind the allotments. That's obviously for another day and another planning meeting and consideration. But at this stage, I'm not aware of that site having actually any SAN credits being or agreed in principle effectively to provide for that site. And obviously, in the absence of SAN credits, that won't be able to progress any further forward.
Okay, thank you.
Any further comments? Questions? Right, in which case, I think we're at the stage where we need to look at the recommendation. That planning permission be delegated with a view to approval subject to the completion of a planning obligation under section 106 of the Town and Country Planning Act as amended, etc., etc. Do I have a proposer? Councillor Madden first, Councillor Durrant second. All those in favour, please show your hands. 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. 8. In objection? 1. And 1 abstention. Right. So officer's recommendation has been approved. Right. We'll have a 3-minute adjournment. If you'd like to stay, feel free. If not, feel free to go. Where's Councillor Mitchell? Where's Councillor Mitchell? And Councillor Riddick. Councillor Walker, can I have your attention, please? That's all right. Right, item 5C, since we've all reassembled, thank you. Removal of the tower mast and associated cabins, etc., at Shootersway, Berkhamsted. It's in parish of North Church. Over to you, Colin.
Thank you, Councillor. So the application site relates to an existing motocross track use just off Shootersway in Berkhamsted. The application is for the removal of a tower mast and associated cabins, the relocation of 5 storage containers to 2 two-storey buildings with accommodation facilities within the first floor, and the construction of a single-storey building for a swimming pool. Before I move on, I'd refer to the addendum where there's been a slight change to the wording of condition 7. That's just to refer to the swimming pool building instead of the development as a whole, as this is the only building that hasn't been constructed yet. Since the addendum, I've also agreed a change in description with the applicant, but the one you see there is the most up-to-date description of development. Moving on, please. So here we have the site location plan on the left and satellite imagery on the right, just outlining the application site in red. So the site comprises areas of hard standing to the south of an existing motocross track, an existing lodge building linked to that use, which was granted in 2009, and 2 buildings constructed following a 2018 planning permission on the site. There's also a telecommunications compound, which consists of a mast and several telecoms cabinets. So as you can see on the right, the motocross tracks are located to the north of the site. The wider site's bounded at all sides by vegetation, most notably an ancient woodland, which is also covered by a tree protection order. The site's accessed of 2 Ponds Lane to the south, which connects on to Shootersway and Berkhamsted, and you've got the A41 further to the south. To the west, you have an existing commercial compound there. Along the boundary with that woodland is a public right-of-way running south to north, and further to the west you have Shootersway and the built-up area of Berkhamsted. The site's located in the Greenbelt and the Chiltern's National Landscape. Moving on, please. So as previously stated, there is a 2018 planning permission on the site for a similar scheme, but since then 2 of the buildings A and B, have been constructed out differently on site. This existing site plan shows the situation prior to these buildings being built, but I've included notes there where they have been constructed. So as you can see, there's an existing hard standing. The grey rectangle in the centre of the site is the existing lodge building that was granted in 2009. To the right of this, where the 4 sort of dark grey rectangles are, that was where there were existing storage containers and sites. Since then, buildings A and B have been constructed in these locations. And on the bottom right there, you have the telecommunications compound, which consists on the left-hand side of a tower mast and several cabinets. To the right, on the right-hand side of that compound, there were previously storage containers there, which since have been relocated into buildings A and B. Just before I carry on, the 2018 planning permission was granted under a previous version of the MPPF, where the relevant greenbelt test was that development projects on previously developed land should not cause greater harm to the openness of the greenbelt. In 2024, the MPPF was amended, and this changes the relevant greenbelt tests for proposals on previously developed land to not have substantial impact on the openness of the greenbelt. So we previously granted a proposal on the old test, and since then the bar has been raised to substantial impact. So this up here is the proposed site plan. The coloured boxes are the buildings that have been constructed. Buildings in this location were granted in 2018. They've just been constructed differently. Building A is on the northern side at the top there, and that contains 3 storage containers at ground floor, and building B on the southern side contains 2 storage containers at ground floor, and these have been constructed. Building B on the south has been granted a lawful development certificate, so despite it being constructed out differently to the planning permission, it was completed in 2021, which was more than 4 years ago. So that building is lawful and immune from enforcement control. On the bottom right is where the proposed swimming pool building will go, where that compound is. So the mast would be removed along with the other buildings. That has not been constructed out yet, and that is as originally proposed in 2018. So it's the same as it was originally granted in 2018. Moving on. So these are the approved elevations as approved in 2018. So on the top there is building A. The black and white building is the existing lodge building. So you're just looking at the coloured pictures for the coloured elevations for the building as it was approved. Building B's on the line below. And as previously stated, there are 3 storage containers in building A and 2 in building B. Building A was approved with 3 sort of bedrooms in the first floor to serve motocross students visiting the site. As approved, there were no accommodation facilities within the first floor of Building B. Moving on. So again, those are just the floor plans as approved in 2018. So on the top line there, although it's quite small, there was 3 sort of bedrooms in that first floor of Building A and none in Building B on the bottom line. Moving on. So these are the elevations as proposed under this application. So both buildings have been constructed out differently. They're larger in terms of their dimensions. The as approved dimensions and the proposed dimensions are included within paragraph 4.3 of my report. So as they've been built out larger, there's change in the fenestration, as you can see on Building A. There's now a large glazed element in the west-facing elevation on the right-hand side there. There's a door also on the ground floor in the middle there to access those storage containers. And Building B is obviously larger as well. It's most noticeably higher, and that's because now it has accommodation facilities in the first floor as well as Building A. Moving to the proposed floor plans. So again, in Building A on the top, there's 3 storage containers which are viewed on site within the ground floor. In terms of the first floor, it was originally approved with 3 bedrooms, and that's been reduced to 2 bedrooms and a shower facility. Whereas in Building B, where there were previously no first floor accommodation, there's now 2 bedrooms. The reasoning for this is the applicant would like some flexibility in terms of how they locate different people within the building. So for example, there's a need to have security personnel on site at some points, and if they're staying on site at the same time as students, you would like the flexibility to place them in different buildings. There is also a condition on the application which would limit the overall number of bedrooms in use at any one point to 3 bedrooms, which the applicant has agreed with. And this is the proposed swimming pool building elevations. So it's 4.95 metres in height, approximately 31 metres in length. As stated, this is the same as it was approved in 2018, so it was based on removing the telecoms compound and filling the footprint with this building. And these are the proposed side elevations of that building. Again, the proposed floor plan, so there's again the same as it was approved in 2018. It's to be used for private swimming pool lessons as well as for general use for motocross students already visiting the sites. And there's a number of facilities you can see there in terms of changing rooms, disabled changing rooms, showers, etc. Can move on, please. That's just a proposed roof plan, so just indicating there'll be solar panels on the roof. And moving on to the site photos. So on the left, I'm standing outside the entrance to the site, looking to the west, down 2 Ponds Lane. So in the distance, you're looking towards Shootersway and Berkhamsted. You can't see for most part, you can't see the site from 2 Ponds Lane, but you can see it once you approach the site entrance, which you can see on the right-hand photograph there, looking through. In the winter, you do get slot views through. So on the right, looking towards the site with the A41 behind me. On the left, I've just entered the site, so I'm looking towards that motocross track from the parking area. There's an existing wind turbine on site, which has been granted planning permission. On the photograph to the right, I've moved down that parking area, so I'm now standing with Building B on my right. The building on the left there is that existing lodge building, which was granted in 2009, and to the right of that is Building A. This is on the left facing Building B. So you can see the first floor accommodation there with fenestrations. You can see the telecoms tower behind it, and to the left would be that telecoms compound. On the right, you're looking the other way to Building A. Yeah. I've now gone upstairs into sort of building B, so there's 2 bedrooms and 1 toilet and a small living area. One of the rooms isn't being used as a bedroom, it's been used as a storage room, and as I stated, the applicant has agreed to a condition limiting the total use of bedrooms to 3 at any one given time. Again, that's just verifying on the left there that one of those bedrooms isn't used as a bedroom, it's used as storage. On the right, I'm sort of going down the stairs and you can see sort of 2 storage containers within building B on the ground floor. This is in the first floor of building A. So right now, 1 sort of bedroom and 1 shower room has partially been constructed. The second bedroom hasn't been constructed yet, so that would be to my right in that left-hand picture. And on the right-hand side, you're looking at the general open area, so I think there's going to be a kitchenette on the right, and it's just an open sort of living area. The picture on the left, I've walked further towards the woodland, so you're looking back at the site now, building A on the right, building B on the left. You can see the telecoms mast on the left there, and again on the picture on the right, it's just looking towards that compound, so you've got the gate, several structures there, and that mast. Please, again, this is, the picture on the left is again looking at that telecoms compound. Where I'm standing is where there would have been 3 sort of storage containers as they were in 2018. They've obviously been moved to the building since then. On the right, I'm standing at the edge of that compound, so there would have been those storage containers in front of me with the telecoms compound, and the swimming pool building will be built on top of this area. This is walking further to the west of the site, so as you go further from the site, you can see in the distance there's an existing commercial compound that we showed in the location images earlier. Here I've come out the site and gone further to the west along 2 Ponds Lane, where there's a rights-of-way going to the north. You can again see on the left the boundary of the telecoms communication compound. There's a fence which is under an enforcement action at the moment. On the right, you can see the lawful compound exists there, close to the site. And these 2 images on the left, I'm just sort of walking down that rights of way, so you can, it's not shown properly, at the beginning of the rights of way you can see slot views to the site, but as you move down it comes out of view as shown on the right, generally not visible from that rights of way. And that's the end, thank you. The application is recommended for approval subject to the conditions outlined in the report.
Thank you, Colin. Right, members, comments, questions? Over to you.
Thank you, Chair. Just very, very briefly, I mean, I note that no one from Northchurch Parish Council is here, and they're not very happy with the swimming pool, but I understand that was already approved in 2018, so I'm not sure what we can say about that. I don't personally see any reasons to turn this down. The buildings are preferable to open to containers, and it's already, I would imagine that the motocross open ground is more offending to the green belt than the actual buildings that won't be seen when it's summer. So I don't have any particular issues with it. And I just wanted to make the comment on that that Northchurch Parish Council brought it to us, but they haven't come and they haven't given detailed planning reasons that I can seriously consider. Thank you.
Very similar to Councillor Hobson, but looking at the previously approved and the proposed, there's not that much difference in the 2 buildings anyway, and also we're going to have the same as we discussed in the last case, where we've got a previously approved big building for a swimming pool. It didn't get built for whatever reason, but it's much, much harder to refuse something which has already been approved in the past anyway. So I would have absolutely no objections to this whatsoever.
One question we know, did North Church object to the original 2018 application? What was the outcome if they did?
I haven't got that information to hand. If we move on to the next question, I can double check on the system now and come back to you on that, if you'd like.
Well, it probably doesn't matter much anyway, but I was wondering if they were being consistent here. And the other thing is there was a requirement to remove the mast, wasn't there, back in 2018? It hasn't been done. Do we know the reasons why it hasn't been done yet?
The project just got stalled, essentially. I mean, he's still, the applicant still wants to construct that out. Obviously, it's owned by a telecoms company, so he has to serve notice, because it's his land and they're sort of leasing it out. He has to serve notice on them, and it's been quite a long legal journey.
Well, I don't see how the applicant's not the telecoms company, is he?
Yeah, but I think they rent the land which he owns, so he has to serve notice on them, basically legally get them off his land before he can construct this. So
but the applicant and the telecoms company are two different things, even if they're related by, because one rents the land from the other.
Yeah, but for this permission, that whole compound will have to be.
It doesn't seem very reasonable to require an applicant who's got no control over whether the mast is removed or not to require them to do that. I think we should delete that requirement, really.
I think that's what justified the previous proposal, because you have previously developed land with development on there. So what's justifying the building is the fact that it's replacing built development on previously developed land rather than on
That might be the case,
land.
but even then it wasn't possible for the applicant at that time to remove the mast of his own volition.
My understanding is that process is ongoing and he's engaged with them, so the applicant hasn't raised concern at that. He has served notice on them legally. That's a separate sort of legal process, whether he can sort of do that or not.
Yeah. Anyway, the end of it is that it's green belt, but under the new PPF, it can arguably be grey belt. And I think if we said it wasn't proper for it to be built on as green belt, then we still have to consider it as grey belt. So I think I would certainly be happy to move it.
I just wanted to say that I think it seemed like a great facility for the Chiltern young riders. And as Councillor Hobson said, most of the disturbance will come from the motocross activity rather than swimming pool. I think it's fantastic that these Chiltern young riders will have access to that. And I'd like to, propose that we grant permission.
Thank you. I'll take that as a proposal for the moment. Anybody else? Any further comments? Right. So we have a proposal that planning permission be granted, subject to these conditions listed. Proposed by Councillor Mitchell, seconded by Councillor Hobson. Can I have a show of hands, please? That looks like unanimous. Right. Thank you. I'll abstain, although I'm in favour. No, I'm abstaining. Right, let's move on to 5D. Harry, over to you.
Thank you, Chair, and good evening, members. So the applicant's partner for this application is an employee of Dacorum Borough Council. So under paragraph 6 of part 3 of the council's constitution, it is considered necessary that the application be determined by the Development Control Committee. So planning permission is sought for a pergola adjacent to the rear facade of the dwelling house and a single-storey flat-roofed outbuilding positioned to the rear of the garden. The officer recommendation on this one is for approval. First slide, please, Rob. So here we have a site location plan. The application site comprises a one-bedroom dwelling, which was established as part of the two-storey side extension to number 9 New Park Drive, which is the property to the north. The dwelling lies on the west-hand side of New Park Drive and is within a residential area of Hemel Hempstead. Slide, please, Rob. So this is an existing site plan. You can see the dwelling house on the right-hand side there, with the neighbour's garage outbuilding just below that. Next slide. So I should just note for members that this proposed landscaping plan is taken from the full application for the approval of the two-storey side extension, now one-bedroom dwelling. So it approved the decking on the far left-hand side to the rear of the garden, portion of grassland, patio directly outside the rear, which is set lower in elevation than the grass. Next slide. And then this site plan here shows the landscaping and also the outbuilding to the rear, and then also the pergola in a shaded rectangle directly outside the rear facade of the property. So this is the elevation and floor plan for the garden room. The garden room will sit upon the decking to the rear. So I note there that the height is 2.475 meters, with the additional 100 millimeters of decking. That would bring it just shy of 2.6 meters, which isn't overly tall. It's quite a compound structure. It's not overly large, and it meets most of the permitted development criteria. Obviously, being a new build dwelling, permitted development rights aren't intact. Slide, please. This is a 3D modelling. So the applicant confirmed that the use of the outbuilding will be split in 2 parts. It doesn't show the internal separation on this model, but the sort of northern part, that right-hand image, that would be for storage, and the lower part, that would be used as an office, garden room, play area for the children. Next slide. So this is the elevation and aerial view of the pergola to be positioned to the rear. Obviously, by the nature of this structure, it hasn't got significant mass or bulk. It's not considered to have any impact on neighbours by way of residential amenity. Next slide. So this is a photo from my site visit in March, just looking at the area where the decking and the proposed outbuilding will be, with the boundary treatments, obviously, as you can see. This is looking up the garden from the rear elevation of the property, showing the step up to where that grassed area is with the patio and the steps running to the left. And then on the reverse, this picture is looking back down towards the property where the pergola will be just above that triple set of doors. And again, a close-up image. And this is just showing the boundary treatment to the south of the site, which is considerably higher on the applicant's side, but considerably lower on the neighbour's side. But it's still not considered that the pergola would be visually intrusive. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Members, comments, questions? Okay, Councillor Bristow.
Yeah, as there are no adverse impacts, I move that we approve the motion.
Thank you. Councillor Madden.
He beat me to it. It looks great. It looks like a really good thing to do. So.
Any further comments? Right, so we've got a proposer to accept offers as a recommendation that planning permission be granted. Proposed by Councillor Bristow, seconded by Councillor Madden. Show of hands, please. Unanimous. Thank you. And 1 abstention. Item 6. Fiona, this is where you come on.
Yes, thank you, Chair. So this is an update on the enforcement report. Unfortunately, Kyle, who would normally present this, isn't here this evening. But he has prepared some slides, so just to take you through some of the recent updates in terms of enforcement. So the first one on here is 121 High Street, Markyate, the installation of extraction system and flue on a listed building. The appeal has been dismissed and a new application is to be received for the flue. Also 121 High Street, Markyate, for internal works to create flats following refusal of listed building consent. Again, the listed building enforcement notice has now been complied with, and I do actually have, which I'll come on to, some photographs to show the before and after. The next one to pull out is Berry Farm, Bourne End Lane, which was, without planning permission, the siting of 3 steel-clad containers and the erection of post and wire fencing. So again, the appeal's been dismissed and the notice upheld. So there's a new compliance date for that one. 16 High Street, Hemel Hempstead. So this was without planning permission and listed building consent for illuminated advertisement signs and also painting of the side and principal elevation of the brickwork and window frames. Also for a flue installation as well. So we've submitted our appeal statement on this and just awaiting the decision for that one. And there's plot G, Cupid Green Lane, change of use to a mixed use of agriculture, carpentry, with the erection of a large chicken coop, a large greenhouse and workshop, principally used for carpentry businesses. Again, the appeal statement has been submitted, so awaiting on the decision on that one. And finally, to highlight is 189 High Street, Berkhamsted, which I have got photographs of this one as well, which shows the before and after relating to matching or non-compliance with matching brickwork, which has now been complied with, and so that can be removed from the list. So if we can just have a quick look at some of these photographs. So this is 121 High Street, Markyate, on the left showing the before, the unauthorised works to the listed building, and now currently on the right, how it's been complied with, the enforcement notice has been complied with, and there's another slide which shows some more pictures of that before and after. And the next slide is the 189 High Street, Berkhamsted, relating to those non-matching materials, which, as I mentioned, have now been complied with. So thank you for that. Kyle did say if there are any questions on anything else within the report, he's happy for any member to contact him direct, and he will respond. So, thank you. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Fiona. I think we're required to just note the report. As Fiona says, if you want any details on the enforcement that's on the list, please contact Carl direct. Okay. Thank you. Meeting closed at 9:10.